This is your Module 3 of Quarter 1, Use of Modal Verbs, Nouns, and Adverbs. Class, this PowerPoint presentation will serve as a guide for grade 8 students in understanding Module 3. So this module was prepared by this development team. They were the ones who prepared this module for us. So remember also that you are allowed to use your module, but reproducing it is against the law. So class, Module 3 has 3 lessons. We have modal verbs for lesson 1, modal nouns for lesson 2, and modal adverbs for lesson 3. Okay, since you are the new normal learners, you are already aware that DepEd has already given us the MELCs or the MELC, Most Essential Learning Competency, hailed or deemed as the most important competencies that we can learn in this pandemic. So in this module, this is what is covered. Use modal verbs, nouns, and adverbs appropriately. So that is the subject code. So in this module, you are expected to first identify modal verbs, nouns, and adverbs used in sentences, construct sentences using appropriate modal verbs, nouns, and adverbs. So that's the second. Third, address different societal problems by writing ideas using different modals. And lastly, express appreciation of Afro-Asian cultures reflected in the story using modals. So these are the objectives of this module. Moving on, we have let's review activity. So read each of the following situations. 1. A learner can get information from various websites and acknowledge the author by writing sources used. 2. A learner may cite sources of information that he or she used in his or her research. 3. A research paper requisitely contains a bibliography written on a separate page and placed at the end part of the paper. 4. It is important to cite the sources of information that you used in your research because it will give credit to the author. And number 5, in writing a bibliography, it is a necessity to use appropriate punctuations. So if you notice, there are underlined words used in each of the sentences. So we have number 1, can, 2, may, 3, requisitely, 4, will, and 5, necessity. Okay, so the underlined words can, may, requisitely, will, and necessity are called modals or modal expressions. To give you an overview of the 3 modals, modal verbs, modal nouns, and modal adverbs, I have placed their meanings and definitions side by side. First, modal verbs. These are auxiliary or helping verbs, which modify or change the meaning of the main verbs. So you use modal verbs in giving advice or suggestions, in making a request, or in giving predictions and prohibitions. In modal nouns, these also express the quality or state in some manner other than as a simple fact. And modal adverbs describe or give information about adverbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. So you will understand more about this as we go through this module. Let us proceed to lesson 1, modal verbs. To the student, examine the two sentences and think if they have the same or different meanings. 1. Sam is too young to drive a car. 2. Sam might be too young to drive a car. Sentence number 1, Sam is too young to drive a car, states a fact that Sam is too young to drive a car. While number 2, Sam might be too young to drive a car, expresses the possibility, the possibility that Sam could not drive the car because of his age. So the presence of the word might in sentence number 2 makes the meaning different. The word might is an example of a modal expression that functions as a verb. So the word might changed the meaning of the sentence, Sam is too young to drive a car. Now, aside from might, there are other commonly used modals such as may, can, could, shall, should, will, and would. These modal expressions function as a verb. Okay, so remember that modal verbs are auxiliary or helping verbs which modify the meaning or change the meaning of the main verbs. Remember how the word might change the meaning of the sentence in the example earlier? Okay, so modal verbs have the following uses. 1. Giving advice. 2. Giving suggestions. 3. Making requests. 4. Giving prohibitions. And 5. Giving predictions. On the next page, you will find out more about these. So the table here will show us the use of the modals and how they are used in the sentence or sentences. So first, the modals will, shall, must, won't or will not, shan't or shall not, can't or cannot. These modals are used to show that you are really certain, meaning you are really sure about something. So in our sample sentence, Jana's debut party will be planned secretly. In this sentence, the modal will is used. So we can say that Jana's debut party will surely be planned secretly. We are really sure that it will be planned secretly. Next, we have should and ought to. So these two modals are used to show or to mean very likely. In the sample sentence, traffic is not heavy. We should be there before the time. So the modal use in this sentence is should. So the sentence mean to say that it is very likely that we should be there because the traffic is not heavy. Next, we have may, might, and could. So these modals mean to show possibility. So in the sample sentence, it may rain today, we can say that there is a possibility of rain today. Next, we have must, have to, and need to. These modals are used to show strong obligation. In our sample sentence, we have the plan must be accomplished without her knowing it. So the word or the modal rather used is must. Therefore, we can say that the sentence means that the plan should be, or rather, there is a strong obligation to accomplish the plan without her knowing it. Next, we have should and ought to. Okay, so earlier, the meaning is, or the modal rather, is used to show strong obligation. But this next one can also show obligation, but this one is weak obligation. We have should and ought to. So I should see a dentist. I have a bad breath, even though I brush my teeth regularly. So the word should is the modal used in the sentence. Next, no obligation. So the following modals show no obligation. We have needn't or need not, don't, need to or do not need to, don't have to do, or do not have to. In our sample sentence, I need not brush my teeth now. I will just do it later. So the sample sentence shows no obligation to do the task. So on this next table, we still have more modals. We have can, may, could, and might. So these modals are used to show permission. In our sample sentence, may I borrow your pen? So the word may is the modal used to show permission. Next, we have can't or cannot, may not, and must not. So these three shows no permission. In our sample sentence, you cannot go out without a quarantine pass. The modal used is cannot. Therefore, the meaning is you do not have the permission to go out because you don't have a quarantine pass. Next is will and shall. We have the word, these modals rather show offer. In our sample sentence, I will bring your things here. So the word will shows offer. Next, we have request. The following modals show request: will, would, and could. So will you open the windows? So will is an example of a modal to use request. And by the way, the word would and the word could, so these two modals could be used to make a request to elderly or to people older than us, or maybe to people of authority. For example, you will ask your teacher the time. So you could say, could you tell me what time it is? Instead of saying, will you tell me what time it is? The first sentence, could you tell me what time it is a polite request. If you will actually say, will you tell me what time it is, to an older person or probably to someone in authority like a teacher, it is, or it will be perceived as being rude. So the words could and would are used also to show politeness. Next, will is a promise, it shows promise. So the sample sentence is, I will come back after sunset. So the word will is your modal that shows promised, a promise rather. Next, another use of will is showing decision. So sample sentence is, I will eat now. Next is advice and suggestion. We have shall, should, shouldn't, or should not. So the suggestion here is you should wear appropriate attire for your job interview, meaning the person is giving a suggestion about an attire that is appropriate for the job interview. We have ability, can or could. So the students can sing harmoniously. Next, general truth, can and may. We can avoid the COVID-19 by following health protocols. So just be mindful or be reminded of the following modals that we can use to show the following: permission, no permission, offer, request, promise, decision, advice and suggestion, ability, general truth, and many more, as already mentioned in the previous slide. So after discussing modal verbs, we have modal nouns. And if you have any questions about the discussion, please feel free to ask your facilitator or your teacher. So modal nouns, lesson 2, activity in the right order. To the student, notice the underlined words used in each of the sentences. 1. The son could not leave his mother alone. He felt a great responsibility to take back his mother home. 2. The possibility of the farmer to leave his mother on the top of the mountain should be done, or else both of them will die. 3. The governor realized his mistake, so with the ability he has as a governor, he will abolish the law. 4. Long, long ago, there lived a poor farmer and his aged mother in a village where a cruel governor would test the capacity of his people in following his demands.